Hey, good evening. Welcome to Foreigner in the Philippines. I should wish you a Merry Christmas. I should wish you a happy and prosperous New Year, all of which, of course, I do. I look around and I remember a lot in my life that was linked to alcohol. Now, personally, I never ever got into alcohol, so maybe I'm being a little self-righteous. I don't think so, but I was for some 25 plus years as a professional musician. I was also in the army for 8.5 years. And during that time, I was very much in the company of alcohol. Not for myself. I went through the Young Men's Association with alcohol, the one where you get drunk so that you can talk the next day about how drunk you got. You know, isn't that fun? And apart from feeling really bad because I didn't take to alcohol very well, it was a short association, just about the last 18 months of being in the army, when I made some really good friends, and we used to play in Reading in Berkshire, and maybe it's still there, but I doubt it. We used to play in a little club called the Latin Quarter, I believe it was called, if my memory serves me right, and it seldom does these days. But I used to have a few drinks and enjoy getting a buzz on. But at the time, I was being very dedicated as a musician, and in an unusual or uncharacteristic moment of enlightenment, I realized that if I really wanted to be a great musician, I would not be able to do the drink as well. And from that moment on, I seldom had a drink. I was very much aware of the idea of the addictive personality, and some of us are. The worst that I can get to it is that I really enjoy, and don't laugh, I really enjoy having a cup of coffee now. I enjoy having tea. It's the closest that I can get. Well, should we even talk about chocolate? It's the closest that I can get to actually reaching a point where my body is telling me to do something. And when people drink tea, when people drink coffee, when people drink whiskey and all of it, when they drink, then that becomes a presence in the body. I'm not offering a scientific rundown of how this actually affects every cell in the body, but how many times do you hear people say, I really feel like having a drink? That's it. I would also say, I really feel like having a cup of coffee. I could really miss having a cup of coffee today. A cup of tea, piece of chocolate, all of those things which your body is telling you need to do. Now, I remember seeing a very good movie where the guy was a police officer, and he got caught. He was a police officer in LA, and he was a captain, and he got caught drunk on duty, and he got out of that department there, but he went to a small town on the coast, and he was the police chief there. It's a very small town, about 2 or 3 people on the police force, and and he was the head of that department. And somebody spoke to him and said, I understand, in that small town, said, I understand you actually were drunk on duty. And he said something that made an impression on me. He said, I wasn't drunk. He said, I'd had something to drink the night before, and I took a drink to straighten me up. So this is a man who did have a drink problem and had drunk heavily the night before, but the next day he had one drink, and it was, as he said, to straighten him up. So the body was making demands on him, which in order to just feel normal again, he had to have a drink. Now, I remember that I started, after many years, I started, let me see, less than 10 years ago now, I started actually to enjoy having a particular kind of wine. And I began to get that feeling, I could really feel like having a glass of wine. And I could almost taste it. Now, we're talking about something that was very low in alcohol, and it was done up in one of those bottles to make it look like champagne. Yeah. But I enjoy, and it was a sparkling, I think what they call a sparkling wine. So all of the wines are totally wasted on me, but this one, a sparkling wine, I actually enjoyed it. Now, I'm so against the idea, after all of those years as a musician and watching alcohol destroy people, that I was especially sensitive to the idea that my body is telling me I need to have even this sparkling wine. So I would stop then until I no longer felt any messages from my body telling me that I had to drink something other than tea. Now, when I was in a band, I was in a regular band, as I've mentioned many times, for 7 years, and we were on the road. It was a highly stressful job. We didn't enjoy a huge amount of fame. There was no great adulation. There was recognition from a limited number of people, a limited amount of an audience. We played to people who really wanted us to be there, and when we were not on the road, we used to go and play at the Empire Leicester Square. And so there was a certain amount of, what can you call it? The tiniest thin end of the wedge of renown or fame or recognition. But people came to see us. And I used to see how men in the band spent a great deal on booze. They used to make fun of me because I didn't drink at all. And if anybody, when I first joined the band, and guy said to me, are you going for a drink? Are you going to the bar? I would say, well, I don't drink, but I'll come and watch. And I realized very soon that that was the wrong thing to say, because people who drink don't want somebody there that's going to watch. But over the years, I did watch, and I watched how alcohol, when people think that it's making them more sociable, when they think that it's making them a better trumpet player or a better anything player, a better musician, I would be there still on this side of alcohol. In other words, no alcohol. and I would watch how their feeling uninhibited would rise, that feeling would rise, but the actual ability to play would get lower. So they were gaining in the feeling that they were doing great. In other words, their ears were dulled in their job because of the alcohol. So they were going along thinking that everything was just wonderful, but it wasn't. And speaking to the wives of those people, they didn't enjoy their husbands drinking at all. I remember that my parents, of course, I was brought up in the UK, and I was brought up at a time up to the age of 15 with my family, and then I went into the army. But my life up to the age of 15 had very little to do with alcohol. I remember as a kid wanting my parents to come home. Now this is a time when children were safe to go out on the street, okay, and it wasn't America, and it wasn't the nanny state, and I knew my parents always used to go, and their favourite pub was called the Black Boy, and that was in Hume. And some people who might be watching this might indeed know that pub. But I would go to the Black Boy, and I would ask Mum and Dad, "Can you come home now?" And they would. But only once was I at the effect of alcohol and how it blurs the ability of the person who has been taking a lot of alcohol to think clearly. And I remember that my father had told me not to play out over the road in the next street. And the trouble was that on my side of the road there were no kids playing. So I'm talking about, when I was maybe 8 or 9 years old. And so I disobeyed him, and when they came home from the Black Boy, I was where I shouldn't be. And my father gave me quite a beating. Not because it was such a terrible thing, but because his judgment was blurred as to what was terrible and what wasn't. And I got a beating that I never forgot. That was alcohol. It wasn't that my father was too strict. It was just that my father had had too much to drink and was outraged at the idea that a small boy would have dared to disobey him. See, so alcohol really does blur the judgments. I remember how girls were warned, don't have a drink, because if you have a drink, a one-night stand might not seem such a bad idea. And then the next day or the next month, when you find out that it wasn't a good idea, you would regret it. But your judgment would be such that it could seem like a good idea on the one night stand. And that was an awful lot to do with booze. And so now, I used to make excuses for my viewpoint, saying, well, I've seen, and I'd be telling people exactly what I've been telling you, that, yeah, well, I've seen alcohol destroy lives. It destroyed lives in many different kinds of ways. It led to divorce, it led to kids getting unreasonably beaten and sometimes killed, and it led to the ill health of the person who has failed to control it. So there's an awful lot that's tied around alcohol. The trouble is that it is so socially acceptable. Now, when I was living as a single parent in Florida, I remember that I would never have alcohol in the house. Now, at that time, hot weather, I went round, made friends with a guy that was another single guy that was in the same complex, and I went round to see him, and he said, "Would you like a beer?" I thought, well, why not? So I had a beer. Now, it just so happened that my son came around and knocked on the door and saw me with a beer. and he didn't like that so much. Anyway, the next time that I went round to see my friend Mike, as it was then, my son suddenly appeared, and there I am again with a beer, and he stuck to me like glue after that every time I went round to see my friend Mike, until finally I realized, wait a minute, this is where this is going. I said, are you concerned about me drinking? And he said, well, yes. I said, do you think I have a problem with it then? So he said, yes. We're talking about an 8-year-old, was he even 8, 7 or 8-year-old boy, and his reasoning maybe wasn't so far off, was it? And I said, well, how many times in the last year have you seen me with a beer? Twice. And when was that? Well, since you've met your friend Mike. I said, okay. And I realized after that actually with the zero tolerance of California, I don't think that you're even allowed to have a beer and go out and drive. And I had my idea confirmed when my son fell out of a tree and broke his arm, and I had to drive him to the hospital. And then I thought you know, what would have happened if it was something more serious than just a broken arm, and I had not been able to drive him because I had been round my friend Mike's and had a beer. So I knocked that on the head too. So I think all of the people that I've spoken to and quietly said, do you think you have a problem? They always say no. No, I don't have a problem. I can quit. But for the musicians I knew, they had a drink every day. Every single day they took in alcohol. So, do you think they had a problem? I do. But they didn't. And that's the nature of alcohol. Well, that's my preaching. I would like to wish you an alcohol-free happy Christmas. Bye for now.